This is the Comics Alternative Interviews, a conversation with Brenden Fletcher and Karl Kerschl. Greetings, salutations, and welcome to another episode of the Comics Alternative Interviews. I'm Derek, and my guests on this episode are Brenden Fletcher and Karl Kerschl, the creators behind the new Image series, Isola. We have a great conversation talking about this unique fantasy title, but before we get to that, I want to let all of you know that this episode of the Comics Alternative Interviews is brought to you by those wonderful folks at Discount Comic Book Service. Go to their website, dcbservice.com, for all of your comics pre-ordering needs. There, you're going to find all DC, Marvel, Image, and Dark Horse titles at 40% off of the cover price if you pre-order. For all of the other publishers, you'll find that those discounts are anywhere from 20 to 35% off of the cover price, and every single month you're going to find some incredible specials. Sometimes those specials could be as much as 45% off of the cover price, sometimes 50% off cover, but every now and again you can find discounts that are even more impressive than that. And if you go to DCB Service right now, you'll find the latest issue of Isola, number 3, at 40% off of the cover price. You can also find great discounts on trade collections of Gotham Academy, a series that features the work of both Karl and Brenden, as well as on Motor Crush, a title that Brenden produces along with Babs Tarr and Cameron Stewart. Whatever comics you're looking for, you really can't beat the prices at Discount Comic Book Service. Go to dcbservice.com for all of your comics pre-ordering needs. And after you do get your comics there, please be sure to send them an email and tell them that the two guys with PhDs sent you. On April 4th, you'll find in your comic shops the first issue of Isola, Brenden Fletcher and Karl Kerschl's brand new series that combines nuanced storytelling with Kerschl's magnificent artwork. In this inaugural issue, we find a captain of the royal guard fleeing her capital city with the realm's queen on their way to a mythical land called Isola. But appearances can be deceiving, and the initial journey unfolds under the cloud of an evil spell that leaves us with more questions than answers. I talk with Karl and Brenden about what transpires in this first issue, how long they've been nurturing this idea, their process of collaboration, and what we might expect in future issues, at least as much as they could tell me without spoiling anything. This was a fun conversation, and let's listen to that right now. I'm pleased to have on the Comics Alternative Brenden Fletcher and Karl Kerschl. Their new series from Image Comics, Isola, comes out, the first issue does, on April 4th. Brenden, Karl, welcome to the show.
Hi there.
Thanks for having us.
Now, both of you, quite recently, have been working with DC, and I would guess that the shift from one of the big two to Image is quite significant. So I'm wondering if maybe we could start off as a way of introducing this new series of your any kind of work patterns or expectations shifting from one publisher to another.
Boy, that's it's complicated because I've been doing stuff for I've been drawing comics for Marvel and DC for a lot of years. So the process has been kind of similar. But then in 2007, I was also doing a webcomic once a week, and I self-published that. So I actually have a bit of experience in the kind of independent self-publishing market. So going from DC to Image was surprising in some ways and not surprising in other ways. I mean, I think we both expected to be way more hands-on, operating kind of like a small business in terms of marketing and publicity, and even to some degree production, like pre-production for printing. But as I said, I'd done a bunch of that. I dealt with printers firsthand before, so it wasn't completely shocking. I think it's working on the actual comic. Actually making the thing is not really any different. We're just kind of working on this thing by ourselves, much the way we worked on Gotham Academy, except with Becky. And we kind of do our thing, and then once it gets solicited, however, it's a whole other ball game, and then you're kind of thrown into the deep end of promotion and all the production stuff. But Brendon's had some experience already because this is not his first Image comic.
Yeah, you're doing Motor Crush.
I'm doing Motor Crush, and I've through the last year and a half dealing with Image on Motor Crush, I've tried to keep Karl apprised of what he could expect from the Image experience. I think going into it, we had prepared ourselves to feel like this was completely a self-publishing endeavor, with very little support on the Image side of it, outside of actually, getting the book printed and to market. But that actually isn't the case. Image has a smaller staff than companies like DC and Marvel, or even like Boom and IDW. But they're very supportive. And this podcast recording is a result of Image, I don't know, reaching out to you or you reaching out to them, but it didn't have anything to do with us. And they facilitated us being here with you today, which we didn't think would happen. Like, we thought we were going to be on the hook for doing all the publicity, all the marketing for this book, but they've been amazing.
Yeah, Image is very well equipped actually for handling this stuff. It's like self-publishing, but also not at all like self-publishing in a way, because they do have a team of really, really knowledgeable people, and they're extremely hands-on and friendly. So, for example, we just packaged up all the files to put issue 1 out to get it to the printer, and I got my hands dirty. Doing a lot of that stuff, but I also worked. I was emailing back and forth with Ryan Brewer, the guy the guy who's helping us on the production end at Image, and that wouldn't happen. You wouldn't be dealing with people like that at Marvel or DC. But I really love that part of the process. So you don't have to do everything yourself. In fact, they'll tell you straight up, they'll handle a lot of it, or almost all of it, for you if you want to. Mm-hmm. But I think it's a nice balance. Frankly, I like to know how the sausage is made, and kind of get involved with that stuff as much as I'm comfortable with.
Yeah, from my end, someone in the media, I can tell you that the people, at least in marketing and publicity at Image, do a fantastic job of reaching out. Not with every title, but with several titles that they have upcoming. What they will do often is to send out an email actually inviting reviewers, and it could be bloggers, it could be print media, or it could be, in this case, a podcaster who may want to interview the creative team. And so they will actively seek out that from the media. And so sometimes I'll respond to those emails, which is actually how I got in touch with you guys. Now, many of the Image creators, the creators have their own websites. It's fairly easy enough to contact the author or the artist directly. But many times with Image, because they're so inviting and so amenable to this, I just respond to their emails, and that's how the three of us got hooked up. Mm-hmm. So they're doing their job there and doing it well.
Very well, yeah. I have no complaints.
Same here. On Motor Crush, on Isola now, they've been incredible. And I think it's just, we just weren't expecting this. We were really expecting to have to do all of this ourselves. But it's been this really nice balance of the things that we loved working with DC PR, and the things that we really wanted to be able to get our hands dirty with over there that we weren't allowed to because it's a bigger company. So it's like best of both worlds.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Brendon, when you started doing Motor Crush with Image, I mean, you came over with the creative team that you were already working with on Batgirl, right?
That's right, yeah. Cameron Stewart and Babs Tarr.
So it wasn't completely new for you.
No, but there was a steeper learning curve. I think it's the same thing. Like Cameron, Babs, and I came in with an expectation of what the Image experience would be, and it wasn't the case. We, as I was saying, had expected to be doing a lot more, handling a lot more ourselves. Did not expect there to be the support system that Image provides. So I think in the case of Isola with Karl, I think between the Motor Crush experience from me and our friends Andy and Becky doing Southern Cross, and also like our friend Wes doing Deadly Class, we just were able to gather a lot more knowledge about what the experience would be like. So coming into Isola, we knew a little more what to expect from working with Image. I think the real surprise, I mean, it's not a surprise. The real shock to the system comes when the solicitation hits and the reality of actually getting your book to market sets in, and all the mechanisms over at Image start to kick in, and we have to pivot from actually creating content to becoming co-publishers and marketers and salesmen. It's kind of a different world to be in, and we did have, like I said, we did have to do it to an extent with DC on Gotham Academy and like Batgirl and Black Canary, but it's way more hands-on here in a great way. It's very time consuming, and it's surprising sometimes the extent to which we have to go, but it's very, very satisfying.
Now, we've talked around your new series, Isola. Let's actually get into the nitty-gritty of what Isola is all about. And, I've read the first issue. I got an early release copy. How would you describe what you have planned for this series? Maybe without giving too much away.
Yeah, it's a challenging question to answer because I think that... Isola had its debut alongside Motor Crush at the Image Expo a couple of years ago, and the story, in a sense, debuted in the back of Motor Crush as the Isola prologue, a 5-part series of series of little vignettes that lead somewhat into the ongoing series that we're doing now. All of that material, including the first issue, sets up a certain kind of set of expectations of what you're going to get. I would say that as the series progresses, you'll see that to some extent we always make sure to deliver on that promise, on this promise of the fantasy adventure and this gorgeous world and a journey where you get to explore all the corners of it, and a tone that hews closely to material you see from Studio Ghibli, the movies of Hayao Miyazaki. But I think in terms of the genre of storytelling, we maybe shift a little bit away from what expectations are. And we haven't been secretive about it. We've talked about it quite openly that it is a love story. And I just said in a written interview that it's maybe a little more say anything than Lord of the Rings. So as we progress, I think that becomes a little more evident.
It just occurred to me, just listening to you speak now, Brendon, that we are in fact exploring, kind of digging into the corners of this world. I mean, we are avoiding, just because of the setting, we are following these women through this world, and they are actively avoiding almost, all aspects of civilization. So the stuff we're seeing is, are the real nooks and crannies of this fantasy world. That's, I think, the stuff that's interesting to me.
I was just going to say, listening to Karl say the stuff that's interesting to me makes me want to just say so much of what we're doing is just built around giving Karl the stuff that he is built to draw, the stuff that he does so well on the page. It all springs forth out of his love of drawing animals and beautiful scenery. And
also, I like doing this. I like presenting this stuff, without a lot of context. I mean, like the context is the world that they're in and the tone of the story, like the atmosphere. But I don't like to explain anything. I like the little details to kind of speak for themselves and for the reader to be able to make draw some conclusions based on their own, based on what they're seeing, without having things specifically explained to them.
Which is it's a challenging task to take on when the format is a serial one where we're only delivering 20 some odd pages a month. And even then, it's an ongoing, but it's an ongoing with a staggered release schedule. So you're only going to get the equivalent of maybe like one story volume a year. We understand this is challenging, but it's a struggle that we have. We don't want to completely, keep it at a distance from the reader, but hopefully this more sort of organic way of world building without so much, without the info dumps that you often find in fantasy adventure series, without all the upfront exposition. Hopefully the character story will carry you through and be the most sort of engaging part of it.
I mean, we're not actually keeping, if we're keeping anything from the reader or at arm's length, it's really just some plot details and the specific details of the the landscape, like politically and culturally. But I think we make up for that with being totally in your face with character relationships and emotions. I mean, I don't think we could get closer to these people if we tried, and I think that's the goal of it.
Brenden, you said a second ago that in many ways you think that the initial part of the series, especially this first issue that's about to come out, is kind of a platform for Karl to really display his creative chops. And that makes a lot of sense to me, because one of the things that struck me about this first issue of Isola is that, there's dialogue, but there's not that much dialogue. And the story seems to be carried primarily through the images. And even when there is some dialogue, it's largely, at least to most readers, much more image-based, because it's the representation of a language that we can't understand. And so when something makes a sound or when someone speaks, we get what appear to be something kind of like words, but it's something we can't understand. So the emphasis is on, I guess, the visual impact and how that contributes to whatever it is that's going on. And one of the things I look for in a first issue is, when I finish it, do I have enough of a sense that I understand enough, not everything, and am I impelled to get the second issue? After this first issue of Isola, I have a lot of questions. But that's a good kind of question. There are good kind of questions that I have, and I do want to read on. I'm not exactly sure what's going on, and you're right. You don't have an exposition dump, which I very much appreciate. I get the relationships. I don't know exactly who the characters are or what their backstories are, but that's fine. I'm along for the ride. There is enough hint here or there about some of these relationships and these characters that I think I get what's going on, and I'm intrigued. And even if I can't understand everything, that's okay. And that is largely carried by Karl's art, I feel.
Well, it's great to hear you say that. For one, it's comforting, because we spent a lot of time talking about where to start this story, and in fact had there's a whole inciting incident that gets these characters to where they are that we have skipped over because we felt that whenever we talked about it, we thought, yes, this is important stuff, but the actual focus of this series is these two women, and we just want to get right into that, and the rest of it we can kind of unfurl as we go along. So I feel like it was the right decision. I mean, but it was months of discussion about how to navigate that. I mean, originally we were going to start each issue with a bit of a prologue or a recap page saying, hey, these are who these characters are, and this is where they're going, and this is why, just to get you into the story. But we never really found a satisfactory way to do that, and it always felt tonally wrong. It just felt like kind of like an artifact of like American periodical comics at the start of this very authored sort of work, I guess. Something that felt like it had a tone that we were trying to maintain, and so ultimately we just decided to get rid of it and just start the thing with like a title page and go from there.
So much of it just comes back to that. Like it's those two things. It's our gut, what feels right to us, and the maintenance or establishment of this feeling, of this tone. And anything that disturbs that feeling or tone, I think it says to our guts that it's wrong and we shouldn't do it. That we're putting it in there because someone has told us that we need it, or that's the convention of the medium we're working in, et cetera, et cetera. And we are really trying to be true to ourselves in this project, even if it's to the detriment of the sort of serial nature of it. We're like hoping that readers will trust us, that this is all in service of something that we feel is true to our artistic intent and true to itself. So I think back to Karl and I going over this, like where we start in issue 1 is exactly where we wanted to start always, but it's not where the plot begins. And so we second guessed ourselves so much. We actually had this whole other issue 1 that we talked about doing, that outlined the location, the place they come from, the place we talk about all the time, the Kingdom of Mar, the walled city, the walled capital city. We talked about the inciting incident, how the queen transformed into this giant cat, her relationship with her family, her all the political backstory. All that stuff could be established. Why they feel the need to run away from the city, how that happens. Essentially, it was a whole other first issue, and the place we're starting now would have been issue 2, but it all just felt wrong. It felt like that's not the point of what we're doing. That's the point of what we're doing is about these two people and about their relationship. And there are other themes. Obviously, it becomes apparent that there are themes that are very much about nature and our place in it. And a lot of that stuff just felt like ham-fisted setup, and every way to attack it, whether it was in an entire first issue or whether it was in a single page of information that we could present before the story, just felt off somehow. And so this is what you got. This is us being true to what feels right about this book, what keeps that tone, that feeling, that sense of emotion, and the sort of thing that Karl and I have talked about for years and wanted to accomplish in our friendship and in our professional lives.
Mm. We actually, even when we decided to start the story where we did, there were still a lot of, we tested a bunch of different semi-compromises by adding different sorts of exposition to the dialogue or being more descriptive about things. And then it all just kind of made us cringe. Anything that, and it just felt insincere. And we were very, very sensitive to dialogue and moments in writing that feels insincere in any medium. So, these are the conversations we have all the time, and they always would end with us saying, you know what? This is its own thing. It's a creator-owned book at Image Comics that we're finally doing. Let's just double down on what we like and if people don't get it, then they don't get it. But I think they will. I mean, if the advanced reviews are any indication, people seem to be following along just fine.
Personally, I'm glad that you guys started the way that you did. I said a moment ago that after reading this first issue, I have a lot of questions, but questions in a very good way. I couldn't help but think, after I finished this first issue, of the old video game Myst.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Where when you play that, you're thrown into a world and you have no idea what is going on, where you are, what you need to do, what any kind of backstory is. You just have to get in, move around, shake up a few things, and then see what happens. In other words, you learn the world as you go along, and I couldn't help but think of that same kind of experience in this first issue of Isola, because when we open this first issue, we see a young female warrior or soldier and what looks like a tiger, strikingly different from tigers that we can recognize. So we don't really know what their relationship is. Then we learn that the young woman soldier is calling the tiger queen, and we pick up fairly early on that the tiger cat creature wasn't always a tiger or cat creature, that there's something else going on here. And then toward the end of this issue, and this is, I don't think in any way giving away any spoilers, we see an older man, and is his name Pring?
His name is Pring.
Right.
Yeah, because he refers to himself in the third person. He says, Pring can teach. And so that's why I assumed his name was Pring. And he suggests even more backstory. Again, question marks are raised here, but it's the kind of experience where I like the fact that I have to figure this stuff out as I read along. Now, there's some first issues where creators will throw you into the middle of something and leave you with a lot of questions, but the questions outweigh the interests or kind of overshadow any interest in wanting to move forward. In other words, can be frustrating. I definitely didn't feel that at the end of this first issue. I want to learn more, and I'm glad that you didn't just regurgitate a lot of the backstory in the first outing.
I'm glad you liked it. Yeah, I mean, we're spoiler alert, it's going to take you a few issues to really understand why the women are where they are and the circumstances of the Queen's transformation. But I think it's going to be worthwhile. I think you're going to hopefully feel very emotionally invested with these people and their journey and their very complicated relationship with one another. And I think if nothing else, it's going to continue transporting you to another place. Karl's line work and Michelle's incredible color work really create this whole this very realized world that I think I hope people will want to revisit all the time. I know, like, I'm working on this book with them, but every page that comes in is just such a delight, and just keeps me excited about working on this story. Aside from the fact that this is something that my best friend and I have talked about for, almost decades in some fashion. It's when you're actually working on something, it takes a long time to go from point A to point B to point C. Getting those new pages in, getting the new line work, getting Michelle's colors, it's just keeps it fresh every day. I'm in a very enviable position, I think.
Now, you guys have been working together for a while on Gotham Academy, so you have your own rhythm that you had established, your own working relationship before Isola. Tell me a bit about that relationship. I mean, how are you guys working together? How, is it just Brendon, you entirely do the writing and then Karl does all the art, or does one have input into the other? And how?
Oh God, no! This is the Karl Kerschl project, top to bottom. Gotham Academy. I mean, Karl and I have known each other for 30-something years. We have a real shorthand, but our previous very professional work was for DC, and we did a little thing for Marvel way back when. but it's all controlled by editors for another publisher, and they need to see specific things. They put everyone in a box, and that's what your contributions are. We tried to buck that trend a little bit at DC. Karl had more say over the script than I think most illustrators do working on DC Comics. But ultimately, it was Becky and I doing the scripting, and then Karl mostly illustrating what we wrote, occasionally making changes here and there. But Isola is Karl and I just chatting about stuff and then making some notes, and then Karl's off to the races, and he's rewriting on the fly sometimes. We have phone calls about road bumps, but this is not a situation where I'm writing a formal script and delivering it to him and he draws it. It's much more collaborative than that.
Yeah, there's a lot of figuring out as we go. We just sit around and talk about, well, Brendon, like the initial pitch for the main story of Isola, like the kind of main through line of these two women, one of them changed into a tiger looking for this island, was something that you came to me with when we were talking about a thing to work on next, and then we kind of ran with it from there. So the actual writing process is really just us talking about stuff and breaking things down point form, like saying, okay, where's this first volume going to end? Where are we? Where are these ladies at the end of this first volume? Now we got to break it down into about 5 issues. So what are the beats of each issue, like the main beats, and and then like after that, it's some point form stuff, and then just figuring stuff out on the page mostly. But a lot of story stuff kind of ends up coming from what I'll make stuff up on the page, like things. Basically, when if I'm designing a scene, it has to have a specific setting, and I've got to choreograph the characters in a certain way. And in doing so, I've got to come up with things for them to do, and that will often result in specific world details or story ideas, and those then spin off into much larger thematic elements. So we're kind of always reworking stuff, and then we do a scripting pass over it at the very end and collaborate on that. So it's a very because we've been asked about this a lot, because it's not a common working situation, but we really do this stuff with complete faith and no egos. We just pitch stuff, and like I think we're always willing to listen to a better idea. Like it only ever gets better. I mean, after doing this for years, I think the thing we learned early on was that the changes just always made it better. Like you could never really get too attached to a certain idea because something new could come along that improves upon it. So it's an amazing situation. I don't take it for granted. I hope we can just keep going on doing this.
It's partly it's so satisfying because it feels like we're kids a lot of the time. I mean, I know eventually Karl has to buckle down and actually draw pages, which is like labor. But in the story, in the writing process, in the conceptual end of the process, it's just two young Canadian kids kicking back and talking about high fantasy ideas and the sorts of things we can do. It's just like we're 16 years old in Karl's parents' basement again, sitting around playing video games and shooting the shit about the sort of stories that we would tell if we ever had the chance.
But it's also not like we ever spoke about the tone of this. I mean, it was just taken completely for granted. I mean, we have this story and we just know what it's supposed to be. Like, of course, it has to feel like this. And then we're always on the same page there.
We only have to put this stuff into words. We have to talk about it afterwards.
Like on this podcast.
I mean, but it's great. Like, we have to sort of self-analyze and figure out like why we feel compelled to do this. Why is it a better choice to to, really dig into the tone over actually giving readers plot details. Why is that more important to us? I don't exactly know, but it's what feels right in our guts, and we're trying to find the best words to explain it to you.
Well, I mean, literally, how do you collaborate? How do you share ideas? Do you email? Do you Skype? Do you text one another? How literally does the process take place where you talk back and forth?
We used to just hang out, like actually in person when I was living in Montreal still. I mean, over the last number of years, but I got married and moved to Brooklyn, and now we're relegated to phone calls and Skype, but it's still hanging out. It's still taking time to spend a couple hours chatting about ideas.
There's a lot of those calls are just chatting, and then like there are periods of focused work, like quote unquote work, I guess, where we say, okay, look, we have to figure out exactly what the backstory is here, what this person's motivation is, or how do we handle this specific bit of story or dialogue, and then usually we'll just kind of jot down notes, like collaborate on like a Google Doc or something. And there's a lot of silence. There's a lot of us. Mm-hmm. Like one person will say something, then we'll like sit around staring at the screen or thinking for a couple of minutes. No one will speak, and then someone will have a better idea, and then someone will go to the bathroom and then come back with a better idea. And that's kind of how it goes down most of the time. It's
always been like that since we've started trying to like professionally do stuff together. Our first scripts, I mean, we're not the most efficient workers. We would have a meeting in a coffee shop, and it would last, 5-6 hours, and we'd maybe get a single script page out of it. But it's a good script page, and it's stuff that when we look back on it today, this stuff from 10, 15 years ago, it's still okay. It's still pretty good.
It's good. It's still good because of the time and thought that went into it. I mean, there's a real stigma in the comics industry surrounding the time it takes one to write or draw something. And I always just think, like, look, it takes years to write a really good film script. So I don't know why people give you guff about how long it takes to write a comic strip. I mean, if it takes a long time to make something good.
It is amazing to me that so much of what we did on Gotham Academy or Batgirl, or even, some of my first Black Canary issues ended up being okay. Because we had to crank that stuff out. We're under the gun constantly. And I know some people work under pressure really well, work really fast. That is definitely not us. None of us. I mean, maybe Cameron out of all of us. Cameron works really fast, and he's really great all the time. The rest of us are really slow. Me, Karl, Becky, Babs can be fast, Annie can be fast, but they also like to take their time developing stuff. But man, like I hate to say it, but I can see where a lot of that work was rushed, where, we got editorial mandates and were forced to change things on the fly, and there was no time to think anything through. You just have to push the script out and just have to get the issue on the stands, and the work suffers for it. And we don't, that's the beauty of working at Image, is we could publish this any way we want on any schedule that we want. We could go bi-monthly if we want. We could publish a single issue a year if that was good with everybody. It's a dream come true.
Well, how did you guys first meet?
Grade 6.
Yeah, in grade 6, we went to school together, and then it was really only for 2 years. It feels like longer, but then you left to go to a different school, and then we didn't really connect again for a couple of years after that. In high school, and then after that it was pretty much basically been inseparable. Spent a lot of time skipping high school and going to the local comic shop
or shooting pool.
Yeah.
We would alternate.
At what point did the shared interest in comics creation, not just the shared interest in comics, but the shared interest in actually doing something in comics, come about?
I think that was the year that we both lived in Windsor in a house together. We were both at the University of Windsor, and
when we were in Windsor, I was already doing work for Lightning Comics.
Yeah, but I remember first talking about the frustration of you and I being able to do stuff like better than some stuff that we had picked up, and saying like we could do this and we should do this, and finally feeling like we're gonna take the bull by the horns and do it. And it was that year that we started putting Miki together conceptually. If you remember, it was a zombie thing first. It was a zombie anthology, and Miki was a part of that. And we had gone to the Motor City Comic-Con to talk to people like Glenn Barr about.
We solicited work from a whole bunch of. I can't believe this. Like from a whole bunch of different people. We talked to Bernie Wrightson. We talked to Jill Thompson. We invited a ton of people to contribute to this anthology we're making. Some of whom actually got back to us, and then of course we didn't make that. So.
We got permission from Harlan Ellison to use the only zombie story that he had ever written to be a part of this anthology. And this was before zombies were cool, let me say. This was like, what, 94? Or something? Yeah, that noise you hear in the background is a dog. Just in case you're wondering what that weird growling is. It was like 94, I think. And Harlan Ellison was so kind, so wonderful, and was like, "Oh, I only wrote one zombie story, but if you guys give me $1 and make sure you credit me, you can adapt it for your comics anthology." And I'm pretty sure this was all happening around that first year of university in Windsor, and we just sort of started picking away at it from there.
Yeah, what was I had, but prior to that, I mean, I started actively pursuing a career in comic, or even became interested in it. I think I was probably 16. It was like grade 11 or something like that when we really started. Like I'd always liked comics and whatnot, but I hadn't really. I was out of the habit of going and getting them, and then I met Stone, and he had this giant X-Men collection, and
our friend Matt Stone.
Yeah, our friend Stone, and it was really, I can trace it back to the time that Jim Lee got on Uncanny X-Men. Really, for me, when I saw that stuff, I fell in love with it, and just wanted nothing more than to be able to do that. And so I started putting together submission stuff probably when I was, like 17 maybe. And then, so coming out of high school, I had like some really small independent work. And then, and then we started collaborating on stuff and really sitting down and starting to learn story. I mean, we watched a lot of films and read a lot of books, but we had never really tried to craft anything. So the Miki project that we worked on for years was really kind of like where we learned to like how a story works. And we read a lot of Joseph Campbell and really like a lot of that stuff was beat for beat, which is funny because now working on Isola, I don't know about you guys, but like I'm really bored with traditional story structure and plot structure, which is part of why I want to, like, we're handling things the way we are on the story. It's paced differently, and I just have very little regard for, like, when we were talking about inciting incidents and things, I was like, all of that stuff is super expected and predictable, and I just kind of want nothing to do with it for a while.
You've mentioned, Karl, your work in webcomics and how, you've had quite a bit of experience in terms of self-publishing and doing your own things outside of the mainstream. Now, given the nature of some of the stuff that you guys have worked on, either together or with other people, like Batgirl, Gotham Academy, Black Canary, that's something that we don't talk on the Comics Alternative about, just given the nature of the podcast, right? We'll discuss anything in terms of comics except for mainstream superheroes. That's kind of our mission statement. But we actually have discussed the Abominable Charles Christopher on a past webcomics episode.
Cool.
Yeah, I think it was summer of 2016. Every month on the webcomic show, we'll look at one completed webcomic and then two that are currently ongoing. So a couple of years ago, we read, at least up to that point, what you had been putting out with Abominable Charles Christopher. And I know that you have self-published, what is it? Is it 3 volumes? That
or two so far.
Just two. Okay,
yeah,
so
there's a third one that's finished. It just hasn't been printed yet. But
well, one of the things I was curious about, Karl, is you're self-publishing these. Why not the decision to work with another publisher? Because there are quite a number of them now who take work that had originally appeared on a webcomic that is creator-owned, and publish it in hard copy. I know that First Second does that, but also, Image does it as well, Dark Horse, IDW, but you made the decision to self-publish.
Yeah, well, it was for a few reasons. And in fact, I think in my second year of doing Charles Christopher, I was actually approached by First Second for that very reason.
Oh,
and they were great. I mean, I still have a relationship with Callista, who originally contacted me. But they said, or her concern, or their concern as a publisher, was that it's a strip comic. So they felt that they couldn't. Well, they needed more material to produce a book from, and they didn't want to do they wanted to do several strips per page, and I thought, okay, that's fair, but it might be a while before I have enough to material to do that, and we'll just keep in touch. And then I just got so into sort of the DIY element of it. Like, I was, at the time, it was my first webcomic, and webcomics were kind of new to me, and I guess to a lot of people in 2006 or 7 or whenever I started. And I just got really immersed in that community, and I liked the idea of just trying to figure it out as a mini business. And there was, I found a local printer here in Montreal, and I talked to them, and it was amazing. I mean, I got to figure out paper stock. I went and visited them to discuss options and pricing, and then I could also do the book layout. I laid out the whole book myself, and I did do ultimately collected editions that were just one strip per page, because I felt like it just breathed that way. They're not all. It does follow a kind of a narrative through line, but a lot of these strips are these kind of non sequiturs and things like that. And I just felt like, because the thing came out weekly, it was more comfortable to read it. It was almost like there was suggested time or space between each one of those strips, even if you're reading them all together. So I don't know. I just felt like I wanted to do it the way I wanted it, and it was always in the back of my head. It still is. I would like to self-publish 3 or 4 volumes and actually finish it, and then package it all up into one giant thing, and then have another publisher do it then, however that comes about. But so yeah, I think I just figured I could kind of have my cake and eat it too there. And I learned a lot along the way. So, and it's still going. I mean, I published a couple of strips maybe 2 or 3 months ago when I had some time, but now I'm so immersed in the Image stuff, I haven't really been able to do it.
Yeah, in a weird way, it's like a companion piece to what we're doing now. I mean, without Charles Christopher, we probably wouldn't be working on Isola.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I will also say, working on Charles Christopher was really the first time I kind of just went off on my own and did something from top to bottom, in terms of writing it and drawing it. And it was I think there would have been I would have felt a lot of pressure, except for the fact that I conceived that comic as just a medium in which I could just do a random gag strip every week. I didn't feel like I was really writing anything. I thought I was just kind of writing some slapstick gags about some animals once a week. So it turned into a longer thing, with a bit more of a narrative structure across all the different character arcs. But what it taught me, I think most importantly, was that you can write, you can trust your gut writing stuff and not follow really traditional formulas. And alongside that, it taught me that you can write emotionally and not have things make a ton of story or plot sense while still having them connect to people on an instinctive gut level. Like it can, like that stuff. I read through the Charles Christopher work every time I've got to do a new strip, and if I haven't looked at it in a while, if I'm putting a book together. And every time I do, I think, I can't believe that anyone follows it or likes it. Like, I mean, it almost doesn't make any sense, but it makes a ton of emotional sense. And I really trust that. I trust making stuff up on the fly if it feels like the right thing to do. And so that's the way I treat Isola as well, and really everything now.
We entered into Isola with a story outline. That's the big difference between the two projects, is that Isola had a setup. It had an ending right from the very beginning, and sort of a loose path laid out for it. But within that path, we can expand and contract story. We can make stuff up. If there's an emotional beat that we suddenly feel, we can follow it. It's really it's a perfect setup for allowing Karl to be able to do what he does best.
You know, I can see, and I hadn't thought of this before, but I can see a number of similarities between the Abominable Charles Christopher and what you guys have set off doing in Isola. Although one of the things that struck me about reading this first issue of Isola, Brendon, is the fact that it's okay. It seemed to go in a different direction from what you're doing with Motor Crush. And now I do think that Motor Crush is fantastical in its own way, but it's fantastical in a more futuristic sense, whereas Isola is fantastical in a more retro sense. In other words, it's an older world. And Motor Crush is something that, well, it deals with, media racing in ways that we can anticipate for the not too distant future. And I'm wondering if you have to make much of a, story writing shift or a mental shift in going back and forth between Isola and Motor Crush.
I've admitted this since I started working on multiple titles at once. I make no secret about the fact that I find it super challenging. I don't know how other people juggle a ton of projects every month so successfully. Guys like Rick Remender, like, how do you do it, Rick? What is happening? I can't do it. And I find it to be one of the most problematic things for me, working on multiple projects at once. And this goes back to the DC days, working on Gotham Academy, Batgirl, and Black Canary all at the same time every month. And if I could just focus on one project a week, it would be, I would have no problem. Like, that would be great. If I could just put my all into one thing for 5 work days in a row, that would be a perfect situation for me. But every day there's a call on me to address something in another project at some time. I've got kind of 3 on the go right now. I've got Isola, Motor Crush, and I'm still working a little bit on my contribution to the Ghost in the Shell book for Kodansha. My illustrator on that, Lorenzo, or Lorenz, I don't know how he pronounces it. Lorenzo Ciccati is an incredible illustrator from Italy. We spent a long time doing, Skype calls, working back and forth. Where I was very hands-on at the beginning. It's now at the point where he's just working on all the illustrations, and I can kind of not think about it too much, but occasionally I'll be in the middle of thinking about some like really emotional Isola thing that we're trying to do, and I'll get an email where I have to address one of the Ghost in the Shell pages, and it's pressing because it's on deadline, and I have to immediately switch gears and think about, our adaptation of Japanese manga and anime into this American format. It's jarring. I find it very challenging. I don't think I'm good at it. I think I just have to do my best. And sometimes that means that work takes a lot longer to complete.
Is it just a matter of, let's say, mentally going from one story world to another? Do you have to kind of like prep yourself psychologically or cognitively to make that shift?
Yeah. I've got to put myself in that place. Because otherwise, and I felt like this is what was happening finally in the DC work at the sort of end of my run on 3 monthly titles. I just had to type. And that stuff had to come out, and I had to trust that I had set up enough of the work beforehand that even though I wasn't like emotionally able to be there with those characters, that I could, I could illustrate those scenes in words in a way that would be helpful for my partners. I don't want to be in that place working on these creator-owned books. Like for Isola, I want to emotionally be there with Olwen and Rook. I want to like feel what they're feeling and be able to understand what Karl and I need on those pages. I don't want to have that compromised in any way, and I actually get a little testy when I'm in that great headspace and I'm able to channel what we're looking for in some fashion. I get a little angry or upset when that's disturbed. I don't know how to get around that. I'm sure it's just, I always feel like I'm an amateur at this still after a number of years. Like I'm still new to this, and guys like Remender, guys like Jeff Lemire, they're such pros. They've been doing it for so long. I know there's a month where Jeff did like 7 different comics in a month, and he was also illustrating this stuff. He's got his methods. He's got his ways to do it. And I just don't have those yet. I haven't figured out the best way for me to do this and for it to integrate into my life. And I guess that's the whole other thing is that I've moved to Brooklyn. I'm married now. My situation is different. Even though I felt like I had kind of been getting a handle on it in Montreal, moving has thrown that all up in the air again and added further complexity. So no, I don't have a great way to do it. I do find it very frustrating. I'm trying to. I've cut back on my projects in an attempt to make this all work better for me. I mean, Karl and I were talking about this just the other day about how he would love to be able to do more, than just illustrate this one book. Like if we could start working on. We got so many stories that we want to tell. If we could start working on that stuff together, but it's so challenging to be able to immerse yourself in 2 things at once to do justice to them.
Now, one of you said at one point something about 5 issues. Can we expect this initial story arc in Isola to be 5 issues?
Yes.
Okay. Now, are there plans, even loose plans, of carrying this narrative beyond the first arc, or is it one of these, we'll wait and see how successful, what kind of reception it receives kind of things?
No, we're like there. We have a minimum of 3 arcs.
Okay.
Planned. Yeah, but because of just the nature of this story, which is really all about a long journey, means that if it does go well, if it is successful, or people connect with it, or depending on how we feel about it, even we could extend that middle chunk into as long a story as we want. So I mean, we have an ending for it. So we for sure got at least three good books out of it. But we'll see what happens.
It does extend itself without us doing
that's
any
true.
Additional work. As we continue working on it, we just keep coming up with stuff, and we want to follow those threads. If we had to, we could curtail, plot lines, story chunks. We could keep things to a minimum. We could not follow our imaginations and just get to the end of the story. But I think we would love to have the liberty to just play this out the way it's presenting itself to us.
And heaven forbid you don't get as much breathing room as you're anticipating with this story, but do you have any backup plans just in case you need to truncate the storyline?
I don't think we could truncate it beyond 3 volumes. I feel like we've got an end destination for these 2 characters, and we can't have them, if they get there at all. I mean, it can't be immediately because it wouldn't really feel earned. so we've got at least that. But really, the only limitation is in like support of it. Ultimately, like if we can make a living at it, I think we'll just keep going as long as it feels like it needs to keep going.
Yeah, as long as that journey feels like it's real to us, as long as it feels like it's the proper length of the journey.
Yeah, I never want to be like making up stuff to pad it.
Yes.
Yeah, like I think there's a ton of material that's waiting to be told there.
And one of the reasons why I asked that question is we've had Rich Tommaso on the podcast a couple of times, and I remember that first occasion where we had him on for an interview. He was currently wrapping up Dark Corridor, and one of the things that he mentioned was that he did have to switch gears to some degree because he had anticipated that series lasting longer than it actually did. So instead of continuing things beyond the first story arc, basically he had to limit it to 1 and then make that first story arc longer than he had anticipated. And he was telling us that in his other series, like She-Wolf, the one that followed, he would not make that same mistake. And he would have a set plan on how many issues and where to go and kind of a fallback plan in case it didn't turn out successfully as he wanted. So, and that's one of the things that I've found fascinating, especially with Image Comics creators, when in many, it's creator-owned material, and what do you do if it doesn't resonate with the readers in ways that will continue to make it financially viable?
Yeah, I think you just you can do a few things. We're very lucky now. You can stick with it and Image if you've got a vision and you can lay that out for them, and you say, well, my story was, I need 12 issues to tell that story, and I'd like to present that as 2 trade paperback volumes. Image will, I imagine, almost always say, yes, please, yes, do that. And you wrap it up. But this would be in our case, like we've got these 3 volumes that we know we can execute without, we can wrap up the story in 3 volumes. Even if our sales are dismal, Image will likely let us do that. If the sales are great and we still wanted to wrap up, they may ask us if we wouldn't mind doing more, if there was a way to do that. Like, I imagine they are not looking forward to the day that Saga ends. And Walking Dead may have been something that ended years ago if it hadn't been so successful. So there's always a way to push and pull. But I think what we're always conscious of now, and I think what most people should be when they talk about this stuff, is that there are 2 markets to find success in. And just because you're not selling a whole lot in comic book stores to the Wednesday Warriors or through the direct market, that doesn't mean that you're not going to find success in the book market, in bookstores. And the ultimate win is to be successful in both. But that doesn't necessarily need to happen. And Image is aware of that. And I can talk, the Motor Crush numbers are no secret. They're all out there. We don't sell, Walking Dead numbers or Batman numbers of Motor Crush issues in comic book stores. But we sure as heck sell a lot of Motor Crush Volume 1 in bookstores. Mm-hmm. So there's no danger of the plug being pulled on Motor Crush, even though it's not the kind of like smashing success in the direct market that we would, pray for. It doesn't mean it's not doing well.
Now, I know, Brendon, you were just saying a moment ago that you don't want to get to the point again where you're juggling several projects at the same time because of that cognitive shift you have to make. But I can't help but ask, are the two of you considering another project for later on, in addition to Isola, where you work on together?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, we have so many. Like I don't even know how many there are at this point. We have a lot of stuff on the back burner. We have one or two specific things that we're crafting, like actively crafting now. I don't know exactly what form they'll take, but it's stuff we definitely want to get around to relatively soon. So yes,
Isola will not be the end.
Yeah. So in the not too distant future, you guys may be juggling more than one, let's say, Image Comics property.
Yeah, maybe.
Or
it's very
properties that are published by Image.
Yeah. The thing is about that is that as cool, as exciting as that is for us, like it's very likely not, a situation where I could draw both of these things. So I think we'd be probably working on this, as co-writers and have to collaborate with other people, which is fine. I mean, it's not something I've ever really done. So I think that's sort of a new frontier for me.
Well, we've entered con season now. What kind of appearances are you guys making to help publicize Isola?
Oh, interesting question. I don't know how much we can talk about because there are a few things that I think we're waiting on official announcements for. But I guess if this show is going to be published closer to the publication date of Isola #1, maybe we can say them. Karl, what do you think?
Yeah, I don't even remember all of them, but I don't think anything's a secret, is it?
Well, I think technically we're waiting on those venues to announce that we're going to be there together. But
I say go for it.
Yeah, I think we can go for it. We're going to both do a book launch at Midtown Comics in New York, which is going to be super fun. Neither of us have done a big signing at Midtown before. And following that, I'll be at Phantom in Washington, D.C. on that Saturday for the launch of Isola. And then on Saturday, April 21st, we're both going to be appearing at the Fried Pie Con. And it hasn't been announced yet that I think my presence has been announced. It hasn't been announced that Karl and I will be there. And it has definitely not yet been announced at the time of this recording that there will be a Fried Pie Con exclusive version of Isola #1 with a gorgeous cover by Karl. So we're doing all those together. And then we'll be at the Toronto Comics Arts Festival together on the second weekend of May. I don't remember the exact dates. It's like 12th, 13th, 14th-ish of May.
Oh, is that it for now? I feel like there might be more.
I don't know. I think that might be it for now.
Yeah, I was wanting to go to TCAF this year, but I don't think that I can swing it.
Have you been there before?
No. That's definitely one of the top ones on my con bucket list. I would much rather go to TCAF than San Diego, and I've never been to San Diego Comic-Con.
TCAF's amazing. It's my favorite
TCAF
show.
is amazing.
Yeah. Although I do go to, I guess, what's somewhat similar in the United States, SPX, which I love.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Yeah. Are either of you coming to Heroes Con in June?
I don't think so. I haven't heard from anyone about it, and I've actually never been to it.
Yeah, I've been the last couple years, and it's amazing. Because it's like everybody, all my friends are there. Or not all my friends, but like I have so many friends there. It's a really good time. I feel like it's tougher for me to pay my expenses doing Heroes because I don't think there's another show in the world that has as many North American comic book creators at it, all vying for the consumer dollar to pay their expenses of getting down there and creating whatever prints and merch they've made and traveling down and staying in hotels. It's not cheap. and it's just tougher to sort of cover costs. So I'm taking a pass this year, although I'm really going to miss it. I'm going to have horrible FOMO that weekend. I'm going to miss everybody, but hopefully I can catch up with everybody at another show.
Yeah, you're right. It's a great con, and if for no other reason, because it's still about comics.
Yeah, yeah.
Not movies, not TV, not other media, but comics.
It's also run by a great comic store with great people behind it.
It's my local shop. Heroes aren't hard to find.
Shelton's a great dude, and Rico's a friend, and it's just it's such a great show. It's such a great experience. The only reason that I'll give it a pass is just because money is an issue. So it sucks to have to do that, but the con season is now like an 11-month season. There's rarely a week that goes by that you can't find a con to do, and I just have to be a little smarter about it this year, I think, and try to change up appearances, try to focus on shows that I can do with Karl to promote Isola, and shows that have dates around our releases, I think. And yeah, so that's what I'm trying to strategize this year. I will likely end up back at Heroes next year because I'm going to hate missing it this year.
Well, good. I'll see you then.
What you need to do is you need to have a kid. That will really really limit the number of shows you do per year.
Well, what's I didn't want to say it, but what's limiting the number of shows that I'm doing this year is paying off my wedding last year.
Well, Brendon, Karl, I thank you again for coming on the Comics Alternative. Wish you the best of luck in terms of getting the word out about Isola, the first issue of which is going to be released on April 4th.
Thanks, Derek. Yeah, this was a real pleasure. I had a really good time.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Again, I want to thank Brenden Fletcher and Karl Kerschl for coming on the podcast and talking with me about their new series, Isola, the first issue of which comes out this week from Image Comics. Run out to your shop and pick up a copy. Or better yet, check out the website of our sponsor, Discount Comic Book Service. There, you'll find the latest issue of Isola and a variety of other titles at incredible discounts. That's dcbservice.com. And after you do get your comics there, get in touch with me and let me know what you thought about my talk with Karl and Brenden. If you go to our website, comicsalternative.com, you'll find that you can leave us a voice message online via SpeakPipe. Or you can call us the old-fashioned way by picking up the phone and dialing 4153-COMICS. That's 415-326-6427. You can also email us. We're 2guys@comicsalternative.com, or you can email me directly. I'm Derek at comicsalternative.com. And you can find us all over social media. We have accounts on Twitter, Facebook, Tumblr, Instagram, Google+, Goodreads, Pinterest, YouTube, Slack, and Discord. You can subscribe to the podcast through Apple Podcasts. You can stream us on Stitcher. You can also find us on Spotify, on TuneIn, on iHeartRadio, and on Google Play Music. But you can find every single one of our podcast episodes, as well as the reviews and comics-related commentary that we post on our blog, simply by going to our website, comicsalternative.com. We'll be back with more interviews in the days to come, so be sure to check back for those. Until then, take care.